Anyway, you clicked on this video because you wanted to hear the discussion of tread pattern versus compound on road bike tyres. Which is more important? Now, the reason this discussion comes up is because on a previous video that I did about the Continental Four Seasons tyre, which is what is on this bike here, somebody said, oh, one of your tyres is on backwards. And I said, oh, fair enough, but I don't think it makes much difference. And this gentleman who I've got in a discussion with, his name is Sheetshire. He said, no, you're wrong. The grip pattern is really important because it forces water away from the tyre, thus improving your all-weather grip on the road. And the grip pattern is most important on the tyre. And I said, well, the tyre is pretty much smooth because the grip pattern has already worn off my tyres because it was so minuscule to start with. And that's not a problem because it's the compound of the tyre which is more important. And then he came back with another disagreement saying that I lacked experience or that I didn't know what I was talking about, and so on and so forth. And he used the analogy of motorsport. He said, look, a slick tyre on a racetrack, for example, is no good in the wet. That's why when it starts raining, everyone goes back to the pits and they get tyres with grooves in, with channels for the water to go when the tyre hits that patch of water. And I will not disagree with him. When you're talking about a car tyre, especially on an F1 car or something like that, or maybe our Mercedes here, we're talking a very big, wide, fat surface. And if you hit a patch of water with that tyre, the water cannot find anywhere to go. It's very much like if you sit in a swimming pool or a bathtub and you chop the water with your hand. A thin hand will slice easily through the surface of the water, like a diver diving off a diving board. But if you take your hand and you slap the surface of the water, you'll feel the impact come up against your hand, the resistance of the water. You can't compress water. You can compress a gas, but a water, when under pressure like that, acts almost like a solid. It gives a huge amount of resistance. So the reason that we have a grip pattern in large vehicle tyres is because as that car racing down the road at say 50, 70, 100 miles an hour hits that patch of water, that water needs somewhere to go. And if you can't displace that water through the gaps in the tyre, you end up with a film between the tyre and the road surface, and that film of water eliminates your traction. Now, these principles don't apply the same way in road bike tyres, and he was trying to tell me that on road bike tyres a grip pattern is way more important than the compound, and unfortunately he's wrong. And to illustrate my point, because he really didn't believe me, and I said, look, I can prove it. I've been online, I've had a look at other websites, independent websites who agree with my assertions, and I just wanted to make that clear with you today. So, I've got a load of tyres here, and you'll notice something about them. If we look at some of these other tyres here, I'll just get my torch. You'll notice that the wider and thicker the tyre gets, the more grip pattern we have. If we come over to this tyre here, again, virtually nothing, especially in the middle, and this tyre on the end is a virtual slick. And yet, these much wider ones, which are probably best suited for mountain bikes or shopping bikes or something like cyclocross, which need it to displace mud, which is a totally different ball game altogether, they do have a grip pattern because they're wider and the contact patch they produce is wider, and the danger of forming that film between the tyre and the road surface is amplified. But if you don't believe me, and unfortunately this gentleman doesn't, then maybe you'll believe two articles that I found. So this one is Rubber Side Down, the function of road tyre tread patterns, and it was produced by cyclingtips.com. And the first winter tyre that they have on here is completely bald. It has absolutely no tread pattern on it whatsoever. And that's a theme that you'll see come up quite a few times in road bike winter tyres. They don't have tread, a lot of them. They look like virtual slicks. Again, it's all about the compound. So this article says, getting a grip on the road. Back in 1997, some guy wrote an article on the grip of road tyres that dismissed the importance of tread altogether. His primary argument was when a surface is harder than a tyre, then the tread cannot leave an impression, and therefore is unable to improve the tyre's grip. Ultimately, the grip of a road tyre depends upon the size and quality of its contact patch. There is no need for tread to deform when the entire tyre deforms as it comes into contact with the road. That is why tyre pressure, thread count, TPI, in other words, rubber compounds and rim to tyre width are far more important than the pattern of the tread. If that was not conclusive enough, they talk about rubber compound. The type of rubber used in the tread has profound influence on the tyre, regardless of whether it is patterned or not. The ideal rubber compound preserves the casting suppleness while being resilient enough to resist wear and punctures. So this article also says, our notions of grip and traction are rapidly challenged once the rain starts to fall. Every road cyclist fears sliding in the wet, and slick tyres appear more susceptible than those with patterned tread. However, there is little evidence that patterned tread improves the grip of road tyres in the wet. A road tyre is already very effective at displacing the water thanks to its round profile. A patterned tread is unnecessary. A broader survey of current thinking amongst tyre manufacturers supports this view. And then finally we have this article here, which has been written by Cycling Weekly, and it's the Buyer's Guide to Winter Tyres. Winter road bike tyres, the Buyer's Guide. And there's a selection of winter road bike tyres. Really interesting article, well worth a read. But just this one line I've highlighted about traction and tread. Rubber compound has the greatest effect on how much traction your tyre will offer. A large, flat-surfaced car tyre needs tread to remove water from the contact surface, but the shape of a bicycle tyre and the small contact patch mean it is the rubber compound that has more of an effect on traction. Tread pattern is still important on dirty roads, dirty roads can especially unstick the grippiest of tyres, so some tread or profiling will allow the rubber to push past the dirt or film, but as we've seen in my tyres, that would be virtually zero. Great rubber with no tread will be a lot more effective than poor compound and deep tread. So we can conclusively see from those articles online that it's actually, when it comes to road bike tyres, it's a very different game from, say, for example, cyclocross or indeed car tyres, where you actually do need some grip pattern. And they all do completely different things. All totally different science. I'm very sorry, Mr. Shire. You cannot compare motorsport with cycling. They're totally different. I understand why you're confused and why you thought that a grip pattern would aid grip on a road bike tyre. And that's basically it. So thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate the views. I hope it didn't come across as too condescending and too arrogant. I know that our conversation on YouTube maybe sounded a bit like that, and it's very difficult to gauge people's feelings when they're writing sometimes. Sometimes a comment can sound quite insulting when it wasn't supposed to be. So I hope nobody's upset with that. I hope the rest of you learned something, and if you didn't learn anything at all, then that's great. I didn't need to teach you anything because clearly you knew already that compound is way more important than grip pattern when it comes to riding road bikes. Thanks for watching, and remember to choose the right tyres for the right conditions, and as always, stay safe. Thank you.